Have you ever thought that it was too late for you to start a new career or that you were too old to make a major change in your life? In this episode, you'll learn how one woman realized the power to reinvent herself at any age. She gives practical advice to people of all ages, from millennials to seniors, on how to break the rules and still feel safe. She'll teach you how to stop living the life that others expect of you and start living your true passion. She's a teacher, an author, and a certified professional coach. She's earned her master's degree at age 40 and her doctorate at age 56. After retiring at 75, she launched her coaching business and gives workshops to teach people how to reach their full potential and use the lessons in her book, Simple Ways to Transform Your Life, Lessons Learned by a Late Bloomer. It's such an honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Barbara Plasker. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much. Hi, Patti. Hi, everyone.
I am really inspired by your story. I really think that the average person is really afraid to make major changes, throughout their life. And the older they get, I think, I don't know if this is what you find in all your work, but it seems to me from working with clients and so forth, the older people get, the harder it is to make any kind of change. Is that what you find?
Yeah, what happens is somebody will have a thought that they want to change their life. Maybe they're unhappy in their marriage, or they're miserable at their job. And they give themselves, they don't even say, well, 2 years, I'll do it in 2 years, or I'll do it next year, or I'll do it next year. But you can say that for 10 years and you'll still be in the same place. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You can keep saying, I'll do it later, but later just keeps passing you by.
Mm-hmm. Did you have someone in your own life that you looked up to, that kind of inspired you that, wow, I can do this at whatever age?
I was at such a low point when I started my journey. I had just lost, between my 20th and 30th birthday, I lost 8 people in my family, including my mother and father. They passed away. And at the same time, I gave birth to 3 children. So it was a very tumultuous time for me. And between 30 and 35, I was just numb and in grief. I didn't even know I was grieving. I just knew that I had been hit hard by life. And I wanted to know what was wrong with me, because I had such low self-esteem, and I couldn't figure out who I was. I didn't know what I felt anymore. And I just said, I can't stay this way forever. I was at such a bottom. I have an interesting story. I went to a workshop at that point in time. After I took TM training, Transcendental Meditation training, and that really helped me get in touch with myself. But I also started attending workshops on personal growth, and the instructor asked us to do a self-portrait. And what I did was I thought, what could I didn't even know who I was. I just put a dot on the piece of paper, and that's who I am. I'm a dot.
Wow.
And I had a foot over it, ready to step on the dot. That's how low I was. Now, fast forward to later on in my life, I came up with the phrase, it's never too late to bloom. That's the name of my coaching business. And while I was writing my book, within the last few years, I realized that dot was not a piece of dirt, because that's what I thought it was. It was a seed. And I grew that seed and bloomed.
Wow. So that's so interesting. I mean, just from a psychological standpoint, to think of, just a dot on a page.
Yeah, I was not in good shape at that point in time.
No, it sounds like you were very severely depressed.
Yes, I was. And the only way to go was up. And I made a promise to myself that I would spend my life trying to get to be the person I was meant to be.
And how old were you at that point?
I was at 35 when I started the journey.
35.
So at 37 was when I went back to school and I got my art degree. And then I finally was able, I couldn't even send out a resume after I got my degree. And finally, I went into the closet design business because I could apply my design skills to that. And in order to promote the business, I started teaching a class at the local community college called One of These Days I'll Get Organized. And what I found was I really enjoyed working with adult students in the classroom than I did working in closets, because I did all the installations myself. And that just sent me in the right direction. I realized that I wanted to help people reach their full potential.
So, and that's what made you decide to go ahead and pursue your doctorate in adult education.
Yes, eventually, because the first job I got when I finally was able to send out my resume was at a university. I worked at Pace University in their adult enrollment division, and I was helping people go back to school. And that was my way of helping people reach their full potential. And I was there for 7 years, and the management changed, and I felt like I couldn't stay there anymore. I didn't want to be in that job. I loved the job, but the management just made me feel very small. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to stay small anymore. I wanted to get bigger. Well, and just feeling in myself, I wanted to bloom more.
Right, yeah. Well, I kind of feel like it's one of those things that we have to look for someone oftentimes, and it doesn't sound like you really had somebody in mind that really you looked at for inspiration, but I think that the average person probably really needs a role model, somebody that they see is doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah,
at whatever age.
I agree. And one of the things I did in this period of my life was I started to join networking groups, and I attended a lot of seminars, and I did see somebody who was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I invited her to my home and asked her how she got there. Well, the things that she did were not at all what I would do, but I was inspired by what she was doing. She was helping people reach their full potential. Mm-hmm. And I knew that was what I was called to do. Mm-hmm.
Well, I look at people like, especially the older I get, the more I look at people, okay, 10 years older than me, 20, 30 years older than me, and what are they doing, and where do I see myself? And I look at, my mom's very active, she's 82, she'll be 83. My stepmom just turned 80 this year, and she made me laugh because she said, don't throw a party for me because I won't come. She made sure on her 80th birthday, she spent it hiking in the Yosemite National Park.
Beautiful.
She rides bikes, she jogs, walks, hikes. She's extremely active, plays golf. She won like a women's championship golf tournament, in her local area in mm-hmm. Nebraska. And it's like, to me, that's what I want to do. When I'm 80, I want to be hiking in Yosemite, I can tell you. I don't want to be sitting around knitting, which I don't do now. So why do I want to do that when I'm 80?
Yeah, right. It's funny because this week I did something that I'd never done before. I went to a meeting of a community group that was trying to improve the schools in my area. And I was there and I said to myself, what am I doing here? But I'm passionate about the children in my school district not getting a good education. There's a disparity in the mix of groups in the community, and one group is dominated, and they're involved in private schooling. So the public schools, they're not voting for things to support the kids in the public schools. Mm-hmm. And so I went to this meeting, and I agreed to take an action. I've never been an activist. I've never been part of any kind of active movement. I have opinions about things, but I'm an introvert and I keep to myself. But this was something that raised something in me that said, I want to do something here. So that's maybe the next step in my life. I really don't know.
Well, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
No, I'm 77.
77. So you retired 2 years ago then,
right.
And now you've embarked on this whole new career of coaching and doing workshops, and it sounds like possibly some activist work, and maybe
you never know.
Maybe you'll run for political office.
No, please, no.
Don't get crazy.
No. But the major part of what I've done in the last 2 years is write my book. Yeah. And I'm just so pleased that I was able to complete it, because I started it in 2009, mm-hmm. and I put it aside because my husband was ill for a few years, and he passed away in 2010. And I picked it up again in 2016, and it's done. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am that I finished that. That was on my bucket list.
Well, I think that's so fantastic. What else did you because I want to get some tips from you that you give in your workshops. But what else is on your bucket list? I'm just curious.
Peace and serenity. That's what I want. That's my goal. I don't have to have anything. I've done some traveling in my life. I do like to travel, but right now my income is lowered because I'm not working. So I'm trying to create opportunities for more income. Mm-hmm. And I'll just take it one day at a time. It's funny, people ask me, hey, Barbara, do you remember when? And I say, no, I live one day at a time. I don't remember back there. It's my excuse.
Do you find that that when you get to a certain age, that there's ageism, that people look at people once they're, 60, 70, 80, certainly by a certain point. Have you ever experienced that, or do you feel that I
have. Yeah, when I don't even remember how long ago it was, but it must have been probably 30 years ago. Yeah, 30, maybe something around 30 years ago. I interviewed for jobs, and I just felt that ageism was an issue because I was being interviewed by younger people. They had no idea what I bring because I've got wisdom now. So to dismiss an older person, especially one that's been active in the business world for all their lives, they bring something to the workplace.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. But I definitely think that that's something that a lot of people can relate to, even at 45, 50, 55, because like you said, you go out there trying to get change careers, or say something happens and your company downsizes, and then you have to change jobs, and then all of a sudden you're competing with people that are much, much younger.
Well, that happened to me. I was downsized when I was 64. I was working at a hospital as a staff development specialist, and I was downsized. My husband was ill. I needed insurance. I needed to work. I was 64 years old, and I did some networking, and I found somebody who was eager to hire me, and that was the civil service job. I worked as a public health educator. So all of my jobs, I've worked with so many different kinds of populations, so I had to learn a whole new curriculum, but my teaching skills as an adult educator, I could transfer those skills wherever I went. Mm-hmm. And so... yeah, it's interesting, I had to pass a civil service test in order to get this job. So I was there from 64 years old to 75 years old. I was there for 11 years.
Wow. And
I had to take a civil service test, and the requirement for the test was to have 9 credits that a medical student would have to take as an undergrad. I had a biology degree. Not because I wanted to major in biology. I wanted to be an art major when I was in high school. I chose biology because I had a crush on my biology teacher as a major, because I wanted to be an art major, and my parents did not support that. So I had to major in something, so I chose biology. Now, if I hadn't had that experience when I was 16, I would not have gotten the job when I was 64.
Interesting.
And so I think that in our lives, I believe there's a spirit guide that we all have. And that spirit guide knew what I needed when I was 64. I did not know that.
Well, that's makes a lot of sense, though, doesn't it?
Yes.
And you don't even realize that something that that by the time you get older, too, not only your life experiences, how much they're going to accumulate and benefit you at some point, even when you're not expecting them. But I think even employers should realize that, people who are looking to employ people, to not discount just because somebody's older.
I agree 100%.
Definitely. Well, what made you decide to write the book?
I had grown in so many different ways, and what I noticed, that the things that I learned and was able to integrate into my life, people learned the concept, but they didn't know how to apply it to their lives. Everything I've learned, I've applied. And so the way my book is written, there are 28 chapters. Each chapter has a concept like balance or courage, acceptance, all the things that I've learned. And I tell a story about each one of these concepts from my personal life or from one of my clients' lives. And then that's the first section. Then there's lesson learned, what did I learn from that experience? Something for the reader to think about in their own lives, and a helpful exercise for the reader. So it's really well organized by concept. Mm-hmm. So for instance, acceptance, I was told by a doctor that I could have diabetes if I didn't watch my food. And I said, it must be a mistake. The test was a mistake. Next 2 years later, I got the same information from her. I denied it. And 2 years later, I denied it. And then one day I started to take my blood sugar, and I saw that it was too high. And I said, okay, it's time for me to accept that this is what I need to live with right now. Mm-hmm. And acceptance is a really important principle, because most people, when they see something they need to change, they want to change it immediately. And so they want to go from awareness to change. And I believe there's a middle step there. It's called acceptance. You have to accept the ground you're standing on before you could take a step up the ladder to change your life. So that's what I've put in the chapter on acceptance.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, isn't it?
It sure is. It is.
Definitely. Well, tell us, how do you, I know you talk about like breaking the rules and still feel safe. What does that mean?
I'll just talk about my experience when I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to get an art degree. Now, my parents did not support me in that. I wanted to go to an art high school, an art college, and they did not accept that. When I was 37, I realized that I was carrying a 20-year resentment against my parents for not letting me go to art school. And I said to myself, the parents are not here anymore. Why don't you go and get your art degree? You can let go of that resentment. And I did. And then my husband said to me, I don't want you to go, because it was a distance. I was living in the northern suburb of New York City, and I had to go to Brooklyn to go to school. And his fear was that I was going to get into an accident, and that's why he didn't want me to do that. And I said to myself, you know, I'm a grown woman. I'm 37 years old. I have the money. I have to arrange for my children's care. But this is something that is doable for me. And I did not let his opinion stop me. And I think that's the people that love us want to keep us safe, just perfectly safe. Mm-hmm. And what's ironic is that, one day I went to school. I left the house before he did. He commuted into the city. And I had an accident. His dream. And he came along maybe 5 minutes after I left the house. And he saw me on the side of the road, with the car having been in an accident and a police officer. So I survived. I can't let other people's fears for me stop me. Mm-hmm. I needed to become the person that I was meant to be. And because of my history, I just said I can't let anything stop me from doing that, because I really wanted to feel whole and myself.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice, and I think that's something that a lot of people, including myself, you have to get to a certain age before I think you allow yourself even, I think especially women, men are used to kind of doing whatever they want, I think. Yeah. But I think women tend to need to get to the point where, hey, I can do it. This is my life too. And yeah, we're in a partnership. Yeah, I'm in a marriage. I'm in a relationship, whatever it may be. But you're entitled to do whatever it is you want to do too. It's your life too, and you get one, and that's it. That's what I tell. And then the older I get, the more I keep that in mind, that I get one shot, and that's why I started the podcast. Last fall was really because it's something that really drives me. I love to meet great people like yourself and to get word out. I see clients every single day of the week that are stressed out to the hilt. They've got a lot going on. They're moving, they're changing jobs, they're downsizing, upsizing, having a baby, getting a divorce. All these big life changes, kind of what what we're talking about today a little bit, as far as making a change. especially with divorce and things like that. But, and so they're really stressed. And so I think, you know, this is my way of helping people get out there and then sharing stories like yours that to me are so inspiring for people to realize you're never too old to start doing something else.
No. It's funny because my mother died when I was pregnant with my third child. I was 27 years old. And my parents always wanted to go to Europe. And so after she passed away, my father went to Europe by himself. And he died 2 years after my mother. So they both died in their 50s. And only my father got to go to Europe, and he had to go by himself because he didn't have my mother to go with. So to me, that's an example of what you're saying. You only have one life, and you have to make sure that you live it, because you don't want to have regrets at the end of your life.
No, and you don't have forever.
No.
So I always like to think, you know, you better get to getting, you know, because if you don't, I mean, you're going to blink and it's going to be 10 years later.
Exactly.
You know, you're going to be, and in fact, I always try to look at it too. Every birthday, I always think to myself, you know, okay, just like when I turned 50 a couple years ago, it was like, okay, I'm 50 now. Yeah, that sounds old. And then I think to myself, yeah, but if I was 40, then 50 sounds, oh God, that sounds terrible. But then I think to myself, but if I was 60, 50, it'd sound pretty damn good, right? So I try to look at it always like, you know, well, what if I was 10 years older or 15 years old? You know, then this would look pretty damn good. So
yeah.
I think it's all in that glass is half full versus half empty.
Yeah. One of the things I used to tell the students when I worked at the university is, because they would come in and they were very afraid to start school again. And I said, you know, 10 years from now, you're going to be 10 years older. You can be 10 years older with a degree or just 10 years older. It's your choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When are you going to start? You want the degree.
Well, that is so true, because in fact, I didn't finish my bachelor's degree until I was 34. I had already had 2 kids, been married for, you know, gosh, I think 12 years at that point, which is hard to believe. Wow. Yeah, I was like 30. I think I was 34. I was 32 or 34, whatever it was. I'd have to think about that. I'd have to do the math now, but I was over 30, and I had been going. I had you know, done a couple years of college right out of high school, and then kind of thought, oh, I don't, you know, really need all this and whatever, and had a job in the federal government, and then had 2 kids and all that, was married. And then it was like one day I decided, wow, I really need to go back to school. I need to get my degree. So I went back to school part-time while I had the kids, and then just one day it was like, wow, I'm about ready to graduate. It was like, it seemed like it was going to be forever. But, you know, one day it did happen, but I just never stopped going until I got it done.
Right.
You know, it's just, I think a lot of times people think that if they don't do it by a certain point, like, oh, if I don't do it right out of college, right out of high school, get their college, then they just won't go.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the important things the message I want to give to people is, we tend to make decisions based on the chatter in our mind. Our mind is always going. We have 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day. And most of them are not initiated by my intentions. It's just something that people say to me, or I have to do this because I want people to like me, or something happened to me when I was a kid and I made a decision that I wasn't going to take any risks anymore because I took a risk and look what happened to me. So all of this stuff is floating around in our heads. And we need to realize that there's another part of us that can separate ourselves from that chatter in our mind, and we can observe it and evaluate it and see if it's still true for us. Because what was true for us at 7 years old, when I just made this decision that I took a risk and I'm not going to, I saw The Bachelor the other day. A woman had terrible experiences with dogs when she was a kid. She didn't want to go near a dog. Well, you're a grown woman now. You can make a different decision if you know you can make a different decision. So I like to think of the mind as a radio, It's got one preset station, and it's all the baloney that we've learned throughout our lives. But there are other stations, because the station that we're tuned into is in my case, was very negative. I was blaming other people for my circumstances. I was complaining about things that didn't go my way, and that's what was happening in this. It's called the monkey mind, and I had to realize that I have to separate myself and find another station, and now I'm tuned into gratitude. That's the station I go to, the station that says peace and serenity. You can have it, and so when I have that station on, I can make decisions based on what I want, not what the monkey mind tells me to do.
Kind of like that programming,
right?
Like a paradigm shift.
Yes,
is what I guess sounds like what you're talking about. Like the people. So tell us about the habits and patterns that people get into that I know you write about in your book that really keep people stuck.
Oh, I give an example of one of my clients whose husband had some issues around money, and every time she had to raise a question about money, he would go into a crazy spin. So she had to think about how was she going to approach him so that he could hear her. She had changed jobs, and she was working as a consultant now, and they weren't going to take her withholding out. She would have to take care of it herself. And she wanted to tell him about it. And as soon as she mentioned it, he left the room. He was so panicky about this new situation he had to deal with. So she had to plan her approach on how she was going to talk to him, because she knew that this was a pattern of his. And I realized that she needed to change, not only plan the approach, but plan the expectation. She knows what's going to happen. So she's got to plan for herself how she's going to deal with what happens. It's very convoluted, but it's you do let other people determine what you do. I just heard a quote today that I loved. It was Stephen Covey. I'm not a product of my circumstances. I'm a product of my decisions. And my goal in the processes that I use is to help people be able to come to a choice, their own choice about what they want. And that happens through that process, observing the mind, becoming aware, observing the mind with a non-judgmental, neutral observer. So it's like you're studying a scientific experiment, and you're taking yourself away from getting personally involved in the observation. And then there'll come a time when you're aware of, like I have this really crazy story. There's a voice in my head that says stupid every time I make a mistake, or I'm driving along and I make a wrong turn, and immediately that voice says stupid. And I finally begin to hear it in the moment. And so what I started to do with it, because every time I heard it, it would diminish my self-esteem. So now every time I hear it, I would say to it, you think I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm. The voice.
Right, the voice. I said, I'm not stupid. I'm a smart woman. Look what all I've accomplished in my life. And I'm an adult now, and you can stop calling me stupid. And it didn't stop. But the other day I had a different experience, and I said to it, I realized when it's stupid, this whole word didn't even come out. And I said, oh well, because I made a mistake. I did a load of laundry, a large load with the dial on small load. So I was mad at myself because I didn't have the whole wash done. And instead of saying stupid, I said, oh well, it's just like I just said, that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, well, I personally like the triggers where if you have a word like you're describing, you hear the word stupid. If I have a negative recurring thought about, or a fear, and mm-hmm. it's a recurring thought that's, something that, I'm afraid of happening. Then as soon as that thought comes in my head, then I'll have something that I've already thought about ahead of time, that every time I have that thought, I'm going to envision, whatever good imagery that I want to think of, so that it's, so that it's instantaneous. As soon as I have that thought again, then I have the vision that I want to reprogram. And so that it occurs less and less, and you don't have so much of that fear happening, or the negative thought.
Right.
Beating yourself up.
Yep.
Sounds like you do.
Yes, I do. I don't do it as much anymore. I think that's the last remnant of anything, because I really come to a place of making a decision to choose peace. I want peace of mind. I don't want to hurt myself anymore. I'm 77 years old. It's time I learned that,
Yeah, I was just thinking, so your goal is by 80 that you'll have no more
Right.
calling you stupid.
Right.
Well, what, just to kind of wrap up, if you had to give one of your best pieces of advice or tips for someone listening that would be thinking, well, I don't know what my passion is. I don't know, that's maybe not feeling even quite like that dot on a page like you described earlier, but just they really feel clueless as to what their mission or their purpose in life is. What would you say to that person?
I have 5 key steps to getting the life that you love. And the first one is to be willing to let go of your comfort zone and try something different. Because it's really hard to leave that safe place that you're in. And think about, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so the next step is to just explore, take risks, go out of your comfort zone to see what's possible. I mean, one of the things I did in that time period was I went back to school and I got teacher certification. And as soon as I stepped into a classroom, my first time in the classroom, I said, oh my God, let me out of here. So I made a mistake. But I was willing to learn from my mistakes, go back to the starting block, and see what else I could do. I think there's a question: if money wasn't an issue, what would you be doing? How would you be living your life? And it doesn't have to be a career choice or a marriage. It can just be anything in your life. Like, I'm playing with the idea of getting a dog. There's a part of me that wants a dog. And there's a part of me that doesn't want a dog. So I'm ambiguous. So you have to. So I don't move. That's another thing that prevents us from moving. We may have a thought we want to do this, but then there's another part of us that says no. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. And so we're stuck between what we want to do and what the voice that says no, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds like a really good thing to kind of hold on to, that notion or that idea that whatever you would do if money wasn't even an issue, what would you find yourself doing if it wasn't about making money?
Right.
And that sounds like that. There's a lot of your answer right there. And then if you can make money doing it, great. Then you're you're in great shape. My father was an Air Force pilot, and he flew Air Force One in the 70s. And he always used to say to my mother when I was little, he would say, "I can't believe they pay me to do this."
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, he just loved it. He loved to fly. He's deceased now, but he loved to fly all the time, and always did, all the way up until his death. And so that is the best life right there. If you can get paid to do what you love, you're always going to be happy.
Yeah, one of the women that retired when I did, she always wanted to be involved in the theater. And so she volunteered at a theater group, and she was the dresser. And she was in that environment, and she was happy. That made her happy, being in that environment. That's not something she ever participated in before. It's not too late to do whatever your heart desire is. You don't have to do it to the level of... I used to think, if I'm going to be an artist, I have to be Michelangelo. No, that's wrong. I can just draw pictures. I don't have to be Michelangelo.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We don't have to have that. I'm only a success if I reach the pinnacle. That's not true. I'll be successful if I make my heart happy.
Yeah, and not only do you not have to be the top to be successful, but you also have to get to be the top. Michelangelo didn't start off Michelangelo.
Right.
Michelangelo started off being just a regular old artist. And that's true. That the 10,000 hour principle, if you've ever heard of that before, you have to do anything. If you do anything 10,000 hours or more, you'll get absolutely fantastic at it. You will be, one of the best at it. I mean, Bill Gates and a lot of others understand that principle, and I think so. You just have to start, though.
Exactly. And that's interesting you put it that way, because I've been devoted the last 40 some odd years of my life to doing personal growth work, and so I'm good at it now, and I can help other people.
Well, I just am truly inspired by you, Barbara, and I want to thank you so much. And please tell us how people can find you and how they can buy your book and find you online.
Okay, the book is called Simple Ways to Transform Your Life. It's on Amazon, and you can buy it by going to Amazon, put in my name, or put in the title of the book, Simple Ways to Transform Your Life. I have a website it's under construction right now. It's barbaraplasker.com, so that should be easy.
And it's BARBARAPLAS as in Sam, KER.com. barbaraplasker.com.
And I have a phone number I can give you. It's 845-393-4673.
Okay, so if anybody wants to reach out to you, would love some advice on how they can reinvent themselves and get going and stop being the dot on a page,
right.
They need to reach out. Well, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful, inspiring time with you, so I really appreciate it, Barbara.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it so much.
All right. And this wraps up this episode of the Pitbull Patti Show. And please always remember to create a master plan for your life, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So until next time, we'll see ya.
Bye-bye.